Hello once again and welcome to CSIT 208, Multimedia and Web Design. This is our 8th session and our 3rd introduction to HTML. This is going to be our final piece for the introduction to HTML. Now, after completing this session, you should be able to create simple HTML tables. You should be able to describe the nesting of HTML tables, describe the spanning cells across columns, and then describe how tables are divided into horizontal and vertical sections. Now, tables can be used to display rows and columns of data, create multi-column text, captions for images, and sidebars. Now, we use the table tag to achieve this. Now, as we know, tables are formatted in rows and columns, and there are tags that will help you do that, as we'll see in the subsequent slides. For a row, we use the TR tag, and then for the cell, we use the TD tag. TR means table row, TD means table data. Now, you can add a border to your table. That is done by specifying the border attribute and supplying a value. So we can do something like border equal to 1 or border equal to 2, and the higher the value of n, the thicker the border will be. You can specify a border color as an attribute as well. In the border color, you specify a color either using RGB, as we have seen before, or hexadecimal. We can also specify border dark color and border light color to make a shaded color border. Now, a typical table is defined as follows. We have the opening and closing of the table tag. We have table row, and then within the table rows, we have table data. So this is technically how it works. A table is created, and then each row is defined. And for each row, you specify the cells or the columns or the table data. So you realize that there are 2 rows, and then under each of the 2 rows, we have 2 cells. Now, when a web browser displays a table, it often adds an extra space. Now, we might want to eliminate that space. We can use the width attribute in the table and the TD tags to eliminate that extra space. Now, we have to keep one thing in mind. In as much as we can specify the width of a table and a cell, which is the TD, a cell cannot be smaller than the content that it has inside of it. Now, centering a table, there are 2 ways by which you can center a table. The first way is to align center. What I mean by that is that you give the table tag an attribute align and the value center. Or you can also enclose the table within center tags. You can also wrap some text around the table. It's possible to wrap text around the table. So to wrap a text around the table, you align left, first of all, and then to the left, the text flows from left to right. Now you can also create the table using TR and TD and table as tags as you normally would do. Now you can also add spaces around the table. We have horizontal space and vertical space, as the name suggests. So we are going to have H space as the attribute, and you specify a value, for example, 20. And you can also have V space, which is the vertical space, 20. Now, there are instances where you would want to span multiple columns, spanning cells across multiple columns. Now, what is going to happen is that you specify what we call the col span on a TD. Now, when you specify the col span, it just tells the TD how many columns it is supposed to span over. So we assume that we have a table with 2 rows. The first row has 4 TDs, meaning 4 columns, but the second row has only 2 columns. Now, what we can do is that we can make each of the 2 columns span over 2 columns of the preceding row. This makes room for alignment, because at the end of the day, the first column of the second row is going to span 2 columns of the first row, and the second column of that second row is also going to span 2 columns of the first row. We can do a similar thing with spanning across rows instead of columns. So we can span cells across rows, and we use the same idea in row span. So you give your TD a row span and a value. Now you can also align the content of a cell. Now there are 2 main alignments we can look at. We can look at vertical alignment, and we can look at horizontal alignment, which is just align. So we use v-align for vertical alignment, whether you want it to be at the bottom, the middle, the top of the cell. You specify that as an attribute of the TD, and if you want it to move from left, right, or center, you use the align attribute of the TD tag, the cell in which that data is going to be contained, and that alignment will affect the cell data. We can also control cell spacing, that is the spaces around each particular cell, and then the padding around each particular cell by using the cell spacing attribute within the table tag and the cell padding attribute within the table tag. Now, there are instances where you would want to nest tables. Nesting tables just means having one table inside the other. Now, what you can do in order to avoid the complexity it comes with is to do the table separately. Once you are done, copy the code of the inner table and paste it in the outer table. Changing the cell color. It's also possible to change the cell colors. How to do that is to use the attribute BG color as an attribute of the TD tag and specify a value, either RGB, hexadecimal, or the actual name, for example, blue or red. You can also divide your table into column groups. Now, we can have the structural and then the non-structured. So with the structural column groups, control is where lines are drawn, but with the non-structured, there are no lines drawn, and both let you format an entire column of cells all at once. Now, column groups, we use the call group span attribute to achieve that after the table tag. We can also divide our table into horizontal sections, and to do that, we can use after the table tag T-head before we do our TR and our TDs. Now with the T-head, we'll use it as the header of the table, and we can go on to do a T-body, which will contain the body of the table, and then we can have a T-foot, which will contain the foot of the table. Note here that this is just going to group them, so you will still need to have your TRs and your TDs within these tags that we have mentioned. Now, controlling line breaks. So unless you specify otherwise, a browser will divide the lines in a cell as it sees fit. So you can use the no wrap attribute placed within the TD tag to force the browsers to keep all the text in the cell in one line. Now, if you can imagine a way to lay out your web page, chances are that it is possible using HTML. Once you imagine it, you just have to use HTML to produce the kind of layout you have imagined. Anytime you are in doubt, you can visit an HTML reference, and a very good HTML reference for beginners is found at www.w3schools.com, and the name of the resource is W3 Schools. Thank you.